Okay, so Cameron Smith writes, Bill, I recently read the F-35 had a 15-to-1 kill ratio against F-15s at Red Flag in 2017. Thoughts? Foghorn would know more about this than I do, but I can give you a few thoughts, a few of his thoughts, because they're so simple and so easy to reproduce. First of all, number one, I wouldn't be surprised. I know the F-22 had an incredible record against F-15s. They'd send up, two F-22s and four F-16s, and the F-16s. Sorry, not F-16s, F-15s. The F-15s never knew what hit them, and then they'd send up 8, and they never knew what hit them. Then they'd send up 16 against 2 Raptors, and they never knew what hit them. So that ratio in simulated air combat. I'm hoping it's simulated air combat. I'm hoping that these weren't actual live weapons used against their own guys, because you never know. So that record doesn't surprise me. What does surprise me and causes me a little bit of it doesn't so much cause me embarrassment, because it's not something I knew at the time. But when the F-35 first came out and they were first doing combat trials against previous generation aircraft like F-16, F-17, F-16, F-18, F-15, that kind of thing. The F-16 was beating the F-35, and this was widely publicized, and everybody was, and I was loudly saying $1 trillion for a jet that doesn't outturn the F-16. I mean, have we really learned nothing about this? Are we really going to go back to the days? Well, don't worry, it's got better avionics, it's got better missiles, and we don't need to be able to turn the airplane. We don't need to be able to get into gun range. Well, that's what it looked like at the time when these things first came out. But what I began to hear about from pilots was that in those very first fly-offs, the pilots of the F-35 had not really any real actual clue of what the airplane could actually do. They certainly, if you're flying an F-35, you're the cream of the crop in terms of Air Force pilots. I don't mean to sound that they're incompetent. They knew everything about the airplane, knew everything about the systems, but tactics are not written by engineers. Tactics are the results of the actual pilot, the actual warrior, taking the weapon out and giving it a stretch. And so it became clear after these first fly-offs that the F-35 was capable of maneuvers and had capabilities that our pilots didn't know how to utilize yet, because no one had ever dealt with something of this kind of flexibility. And I'm sure it's a bunch of different things, but just for an example, the F-35, as I understand it, is surrounded by a sensor suite, and the pilot has the ability to have a kind of it's basically a virtual reality goggle. And what this does is it allows him to look through the airplane. He can look through the airplane, look down, look around, look behind him if he wants to. You combine that with the ability to fire a missile straight ahead and then have that missile turn and do the actual intercept. If you can fire 180 degrees off axis, then the ability to get on somebody's, if you can fire 180 degrees off axis and consistently hit and kill the target, then for at least for the first 4 missiles you have, or 8 or whatever, you really don't need to be able to outturn somebody. I worried, and I still worry, that this idea of technology is going to overcome the fundamental physics of the weapon. They certainly don't appear to be. Well, the F-22 has got a lot of wing. I'm not going to get into this whole thing, hours and hours and hours. But I have to tell you, in this whole thing, in this entire debacle, I think the F-35 is starting to look a lot better. And if we're going to spend $1 trillion on something, I would like them to work. But of all of this whole story of the F-35, which has been really insanely overpriced and everything, the thing that makes me the sickest is that they had to destroy the F-22 production line. And it wasn't like, hey, well, we're not going to build any more F-22s, so we're going to take the tooling and the, what's the word I'm looking for? These support structures and things. They in order to get the F-35 contract, they had to destroy the F-22 assembly line. They had to basically go at it with sledgehammers. And honestly, so I have hope, and I have occasional vague, intentionally vague. That's the word I'm looking for. Validations of that hope. And here's my hope. My hope is that the stuff that we see is going to be 5-10 years behind the stuff that's actually out there, and maybe even longer. It was certainly the case with the F-117. It was the case with the B-2. I mean, these programs were under development for 10-15 years before anybody had ever heard of them. My hope is that this is going on now. I'm quite certain the F-35 will be the last manned fighter that we put up there. Jigs, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you. They're not gone and lost. I was told they were destroyed. That makes me happy, because I would restart the F-22. And, well, it's going to cost $4 billion just to restart the line. Okay, well, here's the checkbook. It's an astonishing airplane, and it's very expensive, but so is the F-35. But, with all of this said, I'm beginning to feel much, much better about this decision. The price is still inexcusably high because of disassembled, saran wrapped, and put into storage. I did not know that. My understanding, Foghorn, was that they was that they had to be basically destroyed because they could not. They had to basically say, we cannot make any more F-22s in order to get this. That's great. That's great. And I'm hearing it from Steve Darrow as well. Fantastic. That's very good. Hooray. I like to be disabused of these things. Anyway, what I was saying is I like to think, and I know that there are people who I've spoken to who know the answer to these questions, and they can't tell me the answer to these questions, and I know they can't tell me the answers, and I appreciate that. But I like to think that there is stuff out there that I don't know about, but I can imagine. And if I had to pick one, if there's one technology out there that I would like to know more about, believe it or not, it would be anti-torpedo technology. I've recently seen a little bit of the actual hardware, but for about 20 years now, I've been thinking, okay, so you've got these incredible carrier strike groups, and that is actual force projection. You know the 11 carrier battle groups and all the attendant destroyer screens and used to be cruiser anti-aircraft, but basically Arleigh Burke screens, and then you got submarines out there checking for the underwater threat and so on. But the only thing that really seemed to be a genuine threat to that force was a torpedo attack from maybe a really quiet diesel electric boat that essentially just didn't make any noise at all. A real modern boat that didn't have to have the nuclear kettle boiling all the time. And I've been wondering for 20 years. The torpedo attack is the fatal attack. I mean, you don't particularly want to get hit by a harpoon or something, but that is an above the surface warhead, and it damages armored belts and it damages superstructure. And like I said, you don't want to get hit with one. But the torpedo actually now is designed to explode underneath the ship, not hit the side and blow a hole in it. It's designed to explode underneath the ship, and that gigantic pocket of air that it puts means the ship's back breaks under the weight, because the keel is not evenly supported. The center just disappears, and the ship basically breaks its own back. The force of gravity basically does it. Help with the explosion impact. And if you've ever seen the footage of it's an obsolete destroyer that gets hit by a modern torpedo. I think it gets hit by a Mark 48 torpedo. It's not like there's a hole in the side. It's like, I've just broken the ship in half. So I always said, well, why can't we come up with a torpedo that swims out and kills other torpedoes? We have anti-missile missiles. Why don't we have anti-torpedo torpedoes? I'd feel a lot better about our carrier fleet if I knew that, you get 6 hot inbound torpedoes coming at you at 60 knots. I'd like to know that the only alternative is to outrun them or spoof them or decoy them. I don't like putting my trust in spoofing and decoying. It works pretty well, but it's certainly not a 100% solution. So I want to know, how can you shoot them? And it turns out there is some. I've seen a little bit of evidence about short-range, very fast torpedo that comes out of the target ship, swims out to the incoming torpedoes and blows them up, which is really cool. And we really need that. One of the things I used to think about this anti-torpedo defense, and I found out after reading all these books about the U.S. Navy, thanks to Steve Green's recommendation, which I've talked about a great deal, that it was not uncommon for either fighters or the anti-aircraft gunners, not unheard of anyway, to be able to blow up incoming torpedoes. You know, you got a machine gun, here comes the bubble wake. But obviously these newer torpedoes don't run at the surface. They don't make bubble wakes, and they don't. It's not really an option. But anyway. So yeah, I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear the F-35 is doing a little better.